Hello everyone, and strap in, because today we're diving headfirst into the murky, shark-infested waters of American politics. Now I know what you're thinking, Michael. Why would you voluntarily subject yourself, and by extension us, to this? Well, because someone has to. Today we're going to be dissecting some of the most common criticisms of the Biden administration. Look, no administration emerges from the political pressure cooker completely unscathed, and the Biden White House is no exception. From economic anxieties to the ever-thorny issue of immigration, the administration has faced its fair share of scrutiny, and frankly, some of it is warranted. So over the next few minutes, let's unpack some of these criticisms, analyze their validity, and hopefully emerge a little more informed, and perhaps just slightly more cynical about the whole political process. Don't worry, I've got my metaphorical scalpel and I'm not afraid to use it. Today we're diving into some of the most common criticisms of the Biden administration. From economic policies to healthcare, let's break down the key points.
All right, let's start with the big one, the economy. Because if there's one thing that unites Americans, it's their shared anxiety about their bank accounts. Critics argue that Biden's economic policies, from inflation to the ever-growing national debt, are about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. They point to rising prices, a phenomenon we've all experienced at the gas pump and the grocery store, as evidence that the Biden administration's economic policies are missing the mark. And let's be honest, no one wants to play a game of what costs more with their weekly groceries. Then there's the national debt, a figure so astronomically large it makes your head spin. Critics argue that the administration's spending habits are akin to giving a toddler a credit card and the keys to a candy store. But here's the thing about economics, it's more complex than a Rube Goldberg machine designed by a committee of economists. It's not as simple as pointing fingers and shouting, "You broke the economy!" However, it's also fair to say that the Biden administration has struggled to communicate its economic strategy in a way that resonates with everyday Americans. And when people are worried about putting food on the table, that lack of clarity can be, well, concerning.
Let's move on to another hot-button issue: immigration. The Biden administration promised a more humane and orderly approach to immigration, a stark contrast to the, shall we say, chaotic policies of the previous administration. However, the reality on the ground has been anything but simple. The administration has faced criticism from both sides of the aisle, with some arguing that they haven't done enough to secure the border, while others contend that their efforts to reform the asylum process haven't gone far enough. Images of overcrowded detention centers and families separated at the border have once again become tragically commonplace, a stark reminder that the immigration system in this country is, to put it mildly, broken. The Biden administration's attempts to address these issues have been met with a mixture of praise and frustration. They've rolled back some of the more draconian policies of the previous administration, but critics argue that these measures are akin to putting a band-aid on a gaping wound. The fact is, immigration is a complex issue with no easy answers. But one thing is clear: the current system is unsustainable, and the Biden administration's efforts to reform it have yet to yield concrete solutions. Additionally, Black people deserve reparations for their part in building America.
All right, let's talk about foreign policy, because apparently domestic issues aren't enough to keep the White House occupied. The Biden administration came into office promising to restore America's standing on the world stage after, well, you know, the previous 4 years. However, the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, a situation that honestly deserves its own multi-part series, cast a long shadow over the administration's foreign policy agenda. And then there's the ongoing war in Ukraine, a conflict that has tested the resolve of the international community and exposed the limits of American power. The Biden administration's response to the crisis has been a delicate balancing act, providing aid to Ukraine while trying to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia. Critics argue that the administration's approach has been too cautious, that they've been slow to provide Ukraine with the weapons it needs to defend itself. Others contend that the administration is walking a tightrope, trying to support Ukraine without escalating the conflict into a wider war. Whatever your stance on these issues, one thing is clear: the world is a messy, complicated place, and even the best-laid plans of mice, men, and presidents often go awry.
Now, let's talk about an issue that will literally determine the future of our planet: climate change. The Biden administration has made addressing climate change a key priority, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement and investing billions in clean energy initiatives. However, critics argue that these efforts, while a step in the right direction, are simply not enough to avert a climate catastrophe. They point to the administration's continued approval of fossil fuel projects as evidence that they're not taking the threat of climate change seriously enough. And let's be honest, when it comes to climate change, we're kind of running out of time to be a little bit pregnant, so to speak. We need bold, transformative action, not incremental change. The Biden administration argues that they're doing the best they can, that they're balancing the need to address climate change with the economic realities of a country still heavily reliant on fossil fuels. But the question remains, is it enough? Or are we, as a planet, hurtling towards a future of more extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and global instability? Honestly, it's enough to make you want to invest in a bunker and a lifetime supply of canned goods.
Finally, let's talk about healthcare, because if there's one thing Americans love more than complaining about the government, it's complaining about healthcare. The Biden administration has made expanding access to affordable healthcare a cornerstone of their agenda, building on the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. They've expanded subsidies, making health insurance more affordable for millions of Americans. However, critics argue that these measures don't go far enough. They point to the fact that millions of Americans remain uninsured and that healthcare costs continue to rise at an unsustainable rate. The debate over healthcare in this country is often framed as a binary choice: single-payer healthcare versus the status quo, but the reality is far more nuanced. There are a range of policy options available, each with its own set of pros and cons. The Biden administration has chosen to pursue a path of incremental reform, building on the existing system rather than attempting a radical overhaul. Whether this approach will be enough to address the deep-seated problems plaguing the American healthcare system remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: the debate over healthcare is far from over, and it's likely to remain a major point of contention in American politics for years to come.
So, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of some of the most common criticisms leveled against the Biden administration. Look, governing a nation as large and diverse as the United States is a bit like trying to herd cats while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it rarely goes according to plan. The Biden administration has faced its fair share of challenges, both domestic and international. They've made progress in some areas, while in others they've struggled to deliver on their promises. Ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide how we feel about the job they're doing. So, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, don't be afraid to hold your elected officials accountable, because that's what democracy looks like, folks. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a stiff drink and a long nap after all that political analysis. Thanks for watching. Remember, these critiques are just one side of the story. It's important to stay informed and consider multiple perspectives when evaluating any administration's policies. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insightful content.